So I'm an autistic and ADHD educator and a clinician, and I want today to talk about what is neurodivergent affirming services, therapies, anything, because I think there's a whole lot of misinformation and misunderstanding out there. When I hear a lot about neurodivergent affirming these days, it sounds like everybody thinks it's some kind of really gentle version of gentle parenting, where it's like, we don't say no ever, we don't upset anybody, we don't put any boundaries in place, it's all just whatever you want to do, you can do it, and that is not neurodivergent affirming. I want to say first, in summary, neurodivergent affirming means we've designed strategies and we're responding to somebody based on the way they need to be responded to, their brain, their body, their person. We can sometimes use strategies designed for a group of people because they have commonality, but ND affirming means we're designing something for that person. And that means some of our really gentle, rejection-sensitive autistics, they need a really certain, specific, gentle, cautious, very careful strategy that, because they're already living in a world of self-inflicted and community-inflicted and society-inflicted trauma constantly, that it can just be overwhelming for additional punishments and things to be put in place. It can be horrifically unfair. However, for your dopamine-seeking autistics that go 100 miles an hour and will literally just walk through anything and don't appear to have that same care and consideration for other people, even though they do, it just doesn't look like that. They need different strategies, and gentle responses to them is just white noise. They're just going to tear straight through it. What I want to do today is talk about what is ND affirming. And ND affirming, if I can go over a few key points, I've got some notes here if you see me looking away. The first thing is it's informed by the autistic and ADHD community. It's not designed by specialists sitting in a white cloud somewhere designing what's best for us. Nothing about us without us. That's a philosophy. So they're also relating to the unique neurology or the brain of the person. They don't result in trauma. These strategies don't result in trauma. They help the person maintain autonomy over their life. They understand autistic and ADHD experience. They work from the perspective of working with, not doing something to the person. They acknowledge that there's actually not really any social hierarchies in autism. So you can connect with a 5-year-old with even more respect than you can a principal of a school if that principal has demonstrated behavior where they really don't deserve respect. The amount of times I'll be talking to, say, a 12-year-old or something and then have to remind myself they're 12, careful of your content, don't talk about that FBI series on serial killers you were just watching, because I forget that they are of a different age because we're just connecting on an interest-based level. So the social hierarchies aren't the same. Autistic children aren't going to know necessarily respect this person because they're a person of authority. It doesn't work that way with a lot of autistic children. Understand that our sensory processing issues are real. We can't stop them because they're inconvenient. A neurodivergent affirming strategy and therapist understands that just because it's massively inconvenient that we can't stand noises and we can't wait for too long and we need to move constantly, doesn't mean that when we're at an appointment with you or we're in your waiting room, those sensory needs just disappear because they're not convenient. They exist no matter what. And respect for our sensory profile is imperative, and it must exist at all situations. Adapted neuroception, or as some people call it, faulty neuroception, we like to call it adapted neuroception, is a real thing. And that's when our brains essentially have developed so many negative neural associations to things that we end up in our lower brain meltdown, or what we call our sympathetic nervous system, our fight-flight, really quickly with respond to things. So with some autistics, if they don't have ongoing access to dopamine and excitability, their brain can literally tell them they're in danger. And they can go into a lower brain meltdown, which is what activates their sympathetic nervous system. And that's that fight-flight nervous system, as compared to the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and relax. That's where you want to be. A lot of autistics spend a lot of their life in their sympathetic nervous system, which is why we have some of the other metabolic issues and other issues that we have in other areas of our life, because being in your sympathetic nervous system too long, it does all of that. Things that are, like, we're often told lower demands, right? Everyone that talks ND affirming says you've got to reduce demands. However, I think what they don't realize is demands are specific to the person. So for me, questions aren't necessarily demands. I'm okay with questions. However, bright lights, I can't manage. I get really overwhelmed by light, and that for me will be a demand. If there's lots of lights, lots of peripheral noise that I don't know where it's coming from, these are all demands for me that will heighten my nervous system. Autism is, and ADHD is, a nervous system disability. That's what it is. you're going to break it really down. So anything that heightens my nervous system is a demand for me. So for some people, questions and instructions are demands. For other people, it might be pure lack of sensory access, or too much sensory access becomes a demand. So demands are specific to the person. Changes of routines, changes of anything can be a demand for most autistics. Shoes that are too tight, boredom, all of these things can heighten our nervous system. And that's what a demand is. Things that are not ND affirming is gaslighting people, lying to people, even children. We really should avoid that, because disingenuous anything is a huge trigger for most of the autistic community. We can often manage a really inconvenient truth that's really quite difficult, rather than a lie, even a basic lie, because the lie, we instantly will start to question whether we can trust the person at all. However, inconvenient truth is still a truth, and we'll work with that. Using punishments that don't relate to the action. So your classic example of, Jimmy breaks Jenny's iPad, and so Jimmy has to go into his room. How does that relate to Jenny's iPad? And what often happens there is Jimmy has this massive sense of injustice, not realizing that he's really done the wrong thing, because he's focused on the fact that he's stuck in his room, and that makes no sense to why he broke her iPad. So in his opinion, it doesn't even relate to it. It's nothing to do with it. And he's just really mad at mum and dad because they put him in his room. However, Jimmy having to do jobs to pay back her iPad, or have to lend Jenny his iPad for a while because he broke hers, that relates to what happened. So it doesn't mean Jimmy gets no boundaries and no outcomes. It just means that the outcomes that happen have to be related to what actually happened, because the autistic brain doesn't work well with these trivial punishments that make no sense. It's why things like reward charts don't work. You do this, you get a shiny star. The hell does that even mean? Some autistics will buckle down and have to do everything to get the shiny star, and others won't even care, or they'll want more. So those reward mechanisms, they just don't work for our community. Reminding an autist or an ADHD of a list of things they shouldn't do, that's not ND affirming. You just put it in their head then. If you're going through, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, then all you're doing is giving them a literal checklist of everything they must do. On the way to the pool, don't run on this fence, don't run on the tiles, don't jump in the deep end. That's now stuck in our brains. And as soon as we get to the pool, we have to tick all those things off, or we can't have fun. It's like when you go into waiting mode. Something's about to happen, and until that happens, you literally can't do anything else. So instead of saying what they can't do, focus on what they should do. Remember, when you get to the pool, we've got to get dressed in our togs first, and then we're going to do this and do that. Don't focus on what they can't do. Don't talk about them. Don't talk about distressing things in distressing moments. When an autistic is upset and distressed, you've got to help them get their brain into a better place, not focus heavily on the reason they're distressed. That just goes worse and worse. To talk about distressing situations, wait until the person's really regulated and feeling much better, and then see if they're in a place where you can bring that up. You also can't expect fast brain autistics and dopamine seekers to just be calm when they're bored. Sure, have less time on your device. Okay, well, what do we replace that with? You can't just say, sit there and play with your sister when your sister's boring. Why do I have to stop my device and do nothing? Our brains literally can't manage that. We must have something to do. So if you want them on their device less, you need to help them find another source of dopamine. And I tell you what, AI has been great for finding things to do. I'll plug into ChatGPT, great activities for a 10-year-old autistic boy. And boom, all these ideas come up. So there's some great ways to find other dopamine sources out there. Expecting autistics to concentrate on things, it's just really, really hard if we don't have a reason to. If we don't care about the topic or the content, it's really, really difficult. ND affirming essentially means strategies related to a particular brain, and they're not causing trauma, and they're led and supported by the autistic and ADHD community. That's what it all means. It's actually not about all of these other idiosyncrasies that keep getting pushed around. So I hope that's really helpful.